Thanks for tuning in to Men for the Win, a podcast hosted by David Kufis and Dan Thompson, two avid fans who appreciate well-played baseball, especially when it's done by the Twins. Men for the Win is sponsored by the Grand Group with Edina Realty. Are you looking to purchase a new home in the Twin Cities area? Or perhaps you're trying to sell your current home? Whether you're upsizing or downsizing, the Grand Group with Edina Realty will meet all of your housing needs. Contact the Grand Group by emailing thegrand, G-R-A-N, group at edinarealty.com or call them by phone at 612-817-8751. The Grand Group with Edina Realty, 7-time Minneapolis-St. Paul Magazine Super Agent Award winners. On this episode, David and Dan recap the Twins' 3-game series against the St. Louis Cardinals. Thanks for listening. Enjoy. Thanks for tuning in to Men for the Win. My name is David Kufis. With me, as always, is Dan Thompson. The Twins return home for a 9-game homestand, but managed to start off losing 2 of 3 to the Cardinals. Probably a series, Dan, that realistically they could have swept.
You know, I got to say about Game 3, I had my fist ready. It was in pump formation, David. I was ready before the end of that game, and we're going to get to that a little bit later.
The pre-pump.
The pre-pump. I was pre-pumping.
The premature pumpulation.
Oh, my gosh. And I would quibble about Game 1 because it felt like they didn't necessarily seem to want to win Game 1 much at all. But certainly Rocco wanted to win the series.
We'll talk about Game 1 and how annoying that was, Dan. I'm already worked up.
Yeah,
I can't even, I'm not organized. I'm talking over you, Dan. I'm so sorry. I'm that upset about the way this series went.
Maybe I can calm you down by asking about the State Fair. How was it?
Oh. Yeah, no, State Fair was great. I brought stickers. Folks, if you are listening to this show because a chubby guy gave you a sticker at the State Fair, please reach out on Facebook or X. I'm just super curious if that does anything. If anybody if they look at the things that I've handed them at the fair. But interesting story, not baseball related, folks. Sorry, let me indulge for a moment. I take the same park and ride every year. It's closest to my house. And I get there, there's no bus. There's one sign, there's no attendant. And I'm normally one of the first people because we get on the first bus to get to the fair before the buildings open and before the rush starts. The bus shows up, I get on, I'm the only guy there. No joke, Dan, this is what happens. I sit down, the bus driver turns to me and he says, "I don't know how to get to the fair." and I'm like, What's happening? And he goes, well, they have these GPS things and no one can get them to work. And so he's got like a little folded over note sheet with these instructions on how to get to the fair. And I've been to the fair, I don't know, a couple of hundred times.
Isn't this your moment to shine,
probably.
David? Like it's like your George Costanza, like I am a marine biologist moment.
Yes. So I am so nervous because I don't want to give them wrong directions. And there's going to be a bus full of people blaming me for getting us lost in St. Paul trying to get them to the fair. But so what happens is another guy gets on, thankfully, and he's like, "Oh, I've done this route a bunch." Because the thing is, I could get him to the fair, but I couldn't get him back to where the buses drop people off at like the parking ride at the back of the fair. I could have had him drop us at the main entrance off Snelling, but then everybody would have been like, "Where do we get this bus again?" To go back. But anyway, a guy gets on and he's like, "I've done this a bunch. I can totally help you get there." And he starts us going west, Dan. And that's when I started to get a little nervous. And I'm like, that is not where the fair is. Like, I may not know how to get exactly where we're going, but I know that's not the direction of the fair.
I knew exactly what to do, but in a much more real sense, I had no idea what to do.
He did get us there. It took a couple of extra minutes, I'd say. There were a couple of extra turns and a couple of extra exits, I think, to get us onto 280. But he got us there. So that was my State Fair experience. I'll say this is totally informal. I have no way to give you data that proves this out. Way less Twins gear than last year. And I just gave out less stickers, but I just didn't see as many people rocking the Twins gear.
Well, speaking of circuitous routes, I think that's one way to get us here to the game recap.
Series recap.
Game 1, Dan. The game that the Twins, they should have just not shown up. Give everybody an off day and just say the Cardinals win. Because they didn't try, Dan. Twins lose this one 6-1. And frankly, I was so disappointed because it seemed like such a big series. Because every series is a big series right now, Dan.
It is. And you know what? They only have 5 hits. They only score the 1 run. The Cardinals score 6. I think David Festa was trying. I think he just he hit a wall here of Cardinals batters, and he wasn't able to get out of the 4th inning.
No, this was rough. 3 2/3 innings, 3 hits, 3 earned runs, 2 walks, 5 strikeouts. The Twins do get on the board first, though. In the bottom of the 2nd, Jeffers singles, Kepler singles, Julien walks to load the bases, Austin Martin with an RBI single, just a soft hit ball to left field. Twins lead 1-0, but that's all the Twins managed to do, Dan. The rest of this game is all Cardinals.
Yeah, top of the 3rd, Matt Carpenter Carpenter walks. Victor Scott, the second, grounds out and steals second and scores on a Mason Wynn single. And so it's a tie game at 1. And then in the fourth, they add a couple more runs. Wilson Contreras hits a double. Brendan Donovan a walk. Double steal. So the runners then are at second and third. And then Lars Nootbaar, who has the most marketable name, I think, of almost anybody in baseball, right? He must have some deal with some kind of nut, doesn't he?
Oh, I was thinking you were like a candy bar.
Maybe
you know
that
what I
would be
mean? Like,
too.
hey,
Yeah,
man,
good call.
hand me one of those Noot bars.
Ah, yes,
you know?
the Lars
You know?
Noot bar. Yum, yum. Nobody in Minnesota is going to be ordering one, by the way, based on how this series went. But yeah, the Cardinals lead 3-1 there. And then top of the 6th, Brendan Donovan hits a solo home run, and so the Cards are up 4-1.
Now, every time you say Brendan Donovan's name, do you not want to say Brendan Donovan Solano? Because that's like just flowing off my tongue, Dan, every single time.
I do miss that guy.
Kind of a cool play in the top of the 7th, even though the Twins lose this one. Richards is pitching. There's runners on second and third with 1 out. Brendan Donovan hits a pop-up to short left field. So Tommy Pham is about 10 feet from third base, and he's making his way back to the bag. There's no real chance for a tag up here, but Royce Lewis cuts off the throw and rockets it over to Castro, who tags Pham. And he was taking his sweet time getting back to third base, and you could tell how annoyed he was with himself that he just got tagged out on a play that he had no right getting tagged out on.
Absolutely. I love that heads-up defense. You got to think that was Royce thinking, and maybe it was even something they talked about pre-play, just to kind of be ready to make a play like that.
Well, I think that the way that Royce reacted and the way that Castro was ready for the ball, I think you're exactly right. I think they see that, hey, he is taking his sweet time getting back to the bag. Let's see if we can get one cheap here.
Clever girl.
Top of the 8th then, Richards gets out of the 7th without giving up any runs, but then he forgets how to pitch, Dan. He can't throw the ball over the plate. So Nolan Arenado and Lars Nootbaar each single, and then he follows that up with 2 walks to Lucan Baker and Victor Scott. So that scores a run on a walk, which is super annoying, and then a Mason Wynn sac fly. So Cardinals now lead at 6-1, and that's basically all she wrote. But a quick note here, Chris Atterbury, as much as we maybe malign him a bit and don't appreciate what he does for the broadcast, because we were really spoiled prior to him. I mean, Corey Provis is great on the radio, but Atterbury had a pretty good line, and it's sort of a shocking line, knowing the way that the Twins organization normally lets their media personalities
if he worked for the Baltimore Orioles, there's no way he'd still have a job today.
No, but Atterbury says Richards has 3 pitches, a fastball, a changeup, and a wild pitch.
That's brilliant. And the fact, I wonder if he was sitting on that, or like if that's something that he just came up with off the top of his head and then thought, oh my gosh, and looked at Dan Gladden and said, could I have said that? You know, like, I mean, because if anybody's going to say something like that, you think it's Gladden. You know, I mean, that would be, he's more of a loose cannon. So credit Atterbury, he's not that wrong.
No, you know, having met Dan Gladden in person, I don't know how that guy hasn't been kicked off the radio. It's pretty impressive. Like, not that he's bad or anything, but just that how he hasn't let a couple of curse words slip is beyond me.
He's got quite the filter. But yeah, so the Twins do lose that one 6-1, and just the chances to come back, they didn't ever really mount anything, it seemed like, of a threat, you know? And so, yeah, Cardinals win that one, and we're not feeling good. But then game 2 is the big matchup between Sonny Gray and Pablo Lopez, and it was so fun to see Pablo Lopez come out and maybe have his best start of the season.
He was absolutely dominant. 7 innings pitched, 4 hits, no earned runs, 9 strikeouts. And there was a lot of articles after the game about Pablo really being up for this one against Sonny Gray. And we've had this conversation before about you're not really pitching against the other starter. Right. I mean, technically, yes,
it's like quarterbacks,
but
right? It's like the Manning-Brady stuff.
Exactly. You never see each other. But it is sort of interesting. Do you think there's some chip on Pablo's shoulder? Because he's thinking that, like, hey, the team put money into me, and they didn't put money into Sonny Gray, and so I really need to show them that they made the right choice here.
I think there's certainly got to be some of that with Pablo, and he came out and he showed it. The Twins start the scoring in the bottom of the 3rd. Martin doubles on a dribbler past first base. Castro walks, and then Larnach homers to right on an inside pitch. It was interesting because the first pitch was inside and it was called a strike, and it was like Sonny Gray tried to sneak another one in, but he pummels it out to right field, and then they're not done. Lewis singles, Wallner singles, and then Kepler follows with an RBI ground out. Would have had more, but then Miranda hit one really far to center, and it was quite the catch by Victor Scott II, kind of leaping out and grabbing it, and then steadying himself enough to not run straight into that wall. It was a brilliant center field play.
Bottom of the 5th, and Larnach homers again. His first game hitting multiple home runs, which is pretty cool.
And then in the bottom of the 8th, Wallner hits another bat drop, crush shot home run to right center, 430 feet. He had 3 hits in this game, and every one of them was a rocket. The guy hits a double to the gap, and it doesn't look like it's going to be a double to the gap, if that makes sense. It looks like just kind of a nice little liner, and then it just goes. It just makes it all over the wall. And that's what this home run looked like. There was a no doubter, a place that really very few Twins players can actually hit the ball.
Every time that guy makes contact, it's amazing. His bat isn't made out of wood, and it's made out of some form of carbon fiber aluminum hybrid, I think, and he just has it painted to look like wood with how hard he hits the ball.
We're about to begin bonding adamantium to weapon exoskeleton.
Here, I got to play another one.
It's like a pun. It's a play on words.
See, it was like a double meaning there that you had with the sounder, David. That's so clever of you.
Oh, thank you. Thank you, Dan. Sonny Gray, former Twin. He goes 6 innings pitched, Dan. I was a little bit surprised he went this deep because Sonny Gray, if you remember, last season he never got through 5. I'm joking. There was so much hate on Twins Twitter between the people who were supportive of Sonny Gray's time with the Twins and the people who thought he was garbage for some reason. And I don't get in these Twitter battles, or I try not to. But my goodness, Dan, can't we just say, yeah, he had some good outings for the team. It was terrible, but what happened in the postseason, it would have been nice for him to show up then. But off he goes. We didn't want to pay him. Leave the guy alone.
He finished second in the Cy Young voting. Let the guy have a career. I mean, another one of those 10, I think 11-year veterans. Yeah, so he goes 99 pitches, 67 strikes. He definitely has a long leash there. And then Trevor Larnach finishes 3 for 4 with those 2 home runs, 4 RBI to carry the Twins to a 6-0 win.
Wonderful, Dan. I don't want to talk about this next game, but here we go. Game 3, Cardinals win this one 3-2. They should not have won this game 3-2. But Zebby Matthews on the mound, who I think is competing with a spot for somebody in the rotation. I lost track, Dan. There's so many names I don't understand.
I think this is Zebby's job right now. I mean, he goes 5 innings, 4 hits, 1 earned run, 7 strikeouts. It's hard to say that he needs to do any more. Worked out of a couple jams. The 1 run was on a home run. I'm on Zebby's train.
Fair enough. Dan's on Zebby's train. You heard it here first. Bottom of the first, though, Twins get on the board early. Willie Castro with a solo shot, so the Twins are up 1-0. Prior to that, though, Dan, in the top of the first, Eddie Julien was slow on this exchange to miss out on a double play. He caught a liner, and he should have got the guy who was a little bit too far off first base, but he took forever on the exchange, Dan, and it just seemed like he sort of soft-tossed it to first, and it's like, no, you got to rifle that over there here, man. We got to get that second out.
I have no praise for Eddie Julien right now, so I'm not in a place to even defend this man at all. Now, to be fair, the top of the second, he dances out of the way of the ball that's hit at him. It's like a Max Kepler-esque ballet move here.
I couldn't believe it, Dan. I watched this thing, and then I watched the replay. My brother-in-law was actually over, and so we're watching the game, and I said, have you ever seen a ball player do that to get out of the way of a ball? I understand if you're a pitcher, and the ball's coming at 110 miles an hour off a bat, you need to dive because you might die otherwise. Eddie Julien, Dan, literally, he danced out of the way of this ball. I do not understand, as a Major League Baseball player, he didn't get his body in front of it, Dan. I don't even know how he was planning to catch this ball other than get out of its way, and I just think it's super frustrating, and I hate talking like this because just last episode, I was talking about how I thought Eddie Julien was going to have a little bit of a longer leash. You can't give a guy a longer leash who cannot play second base. It's the same issues we had with him when he first came up, where his bat was great, but he couldn't play in the field, and now, Dan, he can't play in the field, and his bat is poor. That is not a recipe for success at the Major League level.
No, I think he's dancing his way off of the roster, I think, right now. And I think this is how he takes at bats. He stands up there like a child who doesn't want to get hit anymore. And it's weird how this has happened to him, and I feel like I'm criticizing Eddie Julien more than probably is deserved because of the way that this game went. But yeah, we should move on here a little bit more. So in top of the fourth, there's a great diving catch by Austin Martin, who's playing a whole lot better than Eddie Julien right now. But a big spot at the bottom of the fourth, the Twins load the bases with 2 outs, but Margot strikes out. Now, it wasn't like they had the bases loaded earlier, perhaps, and had multiple chances to score runs here, but still a key moment. The Twins could not get a run because, sure enough, in the top of the fifth, it's Victor Scott tying the game with a solo home run.
Then the bottom of the eighth here, Castro has a leadoff double. Royce Lewis with a pinch hit RBI double scores Castro. So the Twins lead 2-1.
He is the one.
Actually, this is like his first RBI as a pinch hitter. He does not have good
Really?
stats when he pinch hits.
Huh.
Yeah, it's not good. They were talking about it on the broadcast. Anyway, so now the Twins are up 2-1. We go to the top of the ninth. Arenado singles. Donovan hits a tailor-made double play ball, but Julien throws wide right to Farmer to extend the inning. So it should have been a double play, game over. Twins win. The game extends, though. Lars Nootbaar, the candy bar salesman, singles, which scores both Donovan and Furman, who was pinch running. And that's all she wrote, Dan. 3-2. The Twins were just so deflated deflated in the bottom of the ninth. It didn't even look like they realized they could still come back and win this game.
Which is too bad. They got a leadoff single from Carlos Santana. And so you think, just move him over and Eddie Julien came up with a chance, obviously, to have some redemption. But there is no redemption for Eddie Julien right now.
No, he is in a rough spot here, Dan. I'm guessing he's going to come up a bit later in the segments. But with that, let's move into our segments. A sad one for me for the first time in a while.
Catch 'em all, Kirby Puckett!
Puckett's Picks winner.
I picked Vasquez. I thought he was my guy.
This is so funny, though. It's so funny
around.
how the numbers shook out here in the way that we picked people.
So if you didn't listen to last episode, Hogs took Byron Buxton thinking that he was going to come off the IL. Well, he didn't. And this is the first time we've had someone pick someone coming off the IL as opposed to not going on the IL. And we decided to let it stand. It's a risky move, but you can take it if you want. So Hogs took Buxton, who scored 0, which ironically outscored Vasquez, who had -1, which is just so funny because Hogs has to be thinking in his mind, well, at least I won't pick last. Well, no, it turns out, Hogs, that's not how this will work.
He has tried. He's tried to pick Vasquez in the past so he would finish last and didn't, and now he picks Buxton and he ends up not finishing last, so he doesn't get. It's just, this is fantastic.
I can't compete with you physically, and you're no match for my brains.
But the listeners took Lewis. He had 3 points. Hogs, as we said, took Buxton. But Dan, getting a win in Puckett's picks, which I don't even remember the last time you got one, Dan. But Dan took Matt Wallner, the birthday buddy, with 8 points, coming away with the bonus point as well, Dan.
And I was shocked that Trevor Larnach didn't win this. But aside from hitting the couple home runs, Trevor Larnach struck out like 7 times. So it was a lot of negative points for him. So yes, I'm happy for the victory for my birthday boy. It's my first one with Wallner, and it's about time.
So season standings, then I'm still in the lead with 21.5. Hogs in second at 13, the listeners in third at 10, and then Dan catching up to the listeners with 8 solid points, almost to those double digits, Dan.
I feel like a win for me, though, is like a loss for everybody else, you know? And so, like, I should be giving my points to Hogs and the listeners, so I'm helping you. You should be celebrating this.
I am. I'm very happy for you, Dan. With that, here, let's go into Beast versus Bench.
Beast versus Bench.
Is losing fun? Is losing fun?
So I made this pick before I counted up all those strikeouts, but I am going to pick Trevor Larnach for carrying them in Game 2 with those home runs. I love the at-bat against Sonny Gray and hitting that inside pitch. I love the way that he can just launch a baseball to center field. A home run to deep center, David, is one of my favorite things to see because you really have to hit a ball. You know, you can kind of squeak one over one of the corners, right? But you can't do that to center field. So I'm going to pick Trevor Larnach.
I'm going to go with Pablo. Again, absolutely dominant. This looks like the 2023 Pablo. I hope that he can continue this, Dan, because honestly, the way this roster is currently constructed, I'm getting a little bit nervous. And every time Pablo is on the mound, he needs to go 6 or 7 and give us less than 2 earned runs. I mean, we really are going to need some help here down the stretch to make sure this team makes the postseason.
Because my chest is cold and my arms aren't.
That man, you pointed out, I think it was with Hogs, the sweating that he does. The profuse sweating through jerseys. I think Atterbury was talking about it too. Maybe he needs one of those cooling vests under his shirt, under his jersey, just to kind of regulate his temperature a little bit.
Don't forget to bring a towel.
Can you do your bench next? Because I'm afraid I'm going to talk a bit here on mine.
Yeah, so I'm going to give it to Miranda. I'm a little bit disappointed because he went 0 for 9, which is terrible. But I'm mostly disappointed because my predictions are taking a little bit of a downturn here, Dan. I have Miranda as one of the most dangerous hitters in baseball in the next couple of seasons, and he is not looking like a very dangerous hitter as of late, Dan.
He looked really good. I think it was actually during that Houston series when I was back for, and he went on that 12 or 13 at-bat streak. But yeah, he has not reclaimed that heat, I suppose. Okay, so I'm going to give you a number here, David, and I hate when numbers like this come up. So the Twins were heading into this game here, this Game 3, 59-0 when leading, I think, through 8 innings. And Eddie Julien now has added a little 59-1. And I had flashbacks of that playoff game, you know, where the Twins couldn't make the exchange at second against the Astros. And even then, like, the way that Atterbury called it. All right, grounder to second. Julien has it. And you really are celebrating. You're like, this is exactly what you want at this moment. You want a grounder to second for a double play ball. And you end this and you win. And it's 2-1. And you win the series. And all of that just came crashing down in this moment. And Eddie Julien, I'm sorry, but like, this is terrible timing for Eddie Julien because Brooks Lee hit a home run in his first at-bat in a rehab stint. Eddie Julien's not going to be with this team, I don't think. By the time most people are listening to this episode, I think it's going to be Eddie Julien down, Brooks Lee up, and I don't know that we're going to see Eddie Julien again this year unless there's a terrible, horrible accident or something like that to somebody else.
Oh, Canada.
He needs a trip up north, Dan. A trip home to sort of reevaluate, to sort of just take some time to himself and get out of his head a bit. But yeah, it didn't look good for Eddie. And I was very skeptical last episode when you were talking about how as soon as Lee's healthy, he's coming up for Julien. I hate saying this, Dan. I think you're right. I think you had a right prediction here. And I just think that from the Twins' perspective, if you're just looking at results, that the choice is simple.
I mean, there is no doubt in my mind that Brooks Lee makes that play, and then we're talking about a series win. There is the fundamentals of that sport are just pounded into Brooks Lee's brain. There's a love of the game, dare I say, that seems to permeate everything Brooks Lee does. And I just wonder, does Eddie love this game?
How can you not be romantic about baseball, Dan?
Sorry. Am I being too harsh? I'm being too harsh. I'm sorry, Eddie Julien. I wish you all the best at St. Paul, and you can turn your career around and we see you again.
This is the difference between you and I, Dan, because your thought was maybe I'm being too harsh. And all I could think the whole time is I don't think you're being harsh enough, Dan.
Have you no joy in your life? Is there no song in your heart?
I thought we established last episode that I'm the optimist on the show, Dan.
I don't know. Anyway, well, this is, ironically, still, we have more to say about this. Let's look into the Rocco's Rewind.
Rocco's Rewind.
I understand what I'm about to say is very easy to say knowing what happened. I want to lay that out. I want to tell you that I know you can at me. I understand what I'm doing here. However, Game 3, bottom 8. I think Rocco needed to do better to set him up for his 9th inning. It's a one-run game. And it's a one-run game before he makes the move that I'm questioning.
Sure.
He lets Farmer pinch hit for Wallner. And what that does is that moves Castro from shortstop to left field. And now Julien is still at second base. Matt Wallner has been great. Obviously one of the better players, I'd say, within the last 10 to 15 games for this organization. I think you let him hit against a lefty. Just let him take that opportunity, because then what you can do, you leave Castro where he is at shortstop, and then you can make a substitution by putting Farmer in for Julien at second base. The way Julien had fielded his position for the entirety of Game 3 should have given you a light bulb that, hey, we should get him out of here sooner rather than later. But I truly think that this is partially on Rocco for letting Julien be in a position to have to make that play to end the game.
Well, and the irony, of course, is that this is what Rocco does all the time. Like, he makes all kinds of defensive substitutions. I do think he overthought this. I know that Romero, the reliever for the Cardinals, who's a lefty, is tough on lefties, but I agree. At some point, you got to let the hot bat swing and see what happens here. You're already up, right? And so in some sense, shouldn't he be thinking more about the defensive situation he's going to have in the 9th than adding runs in the bottom of the 8th? I get both, but I think he was wrong. Another thing about this, and it actually relates to the end of Game 3, is it's the way that Rocco handled Game 2, bringing Jax and Duran in at the end of the game, even though it wasn't save situations for either one. I get that the guys hadn't pitched in a while. I just do wonder, is Duran a little bit different in this situation? Now, I do not fault Duran, by the way, at all for how the inning went here, because this is, to me, is on Julien. But I wonder, does that inning change if Duran is a little bit sharper and a little bit more rested? Because now you've used him back to back, and now you got to keep playing here. And so I wonder if this is going to have some long-term ramifications.
I sure hope not, Dan. But yeah, as you mentioned here, no rest for the weary as the Twins move right into the series against the Braves tomorrow night.
All right, well, let's move forward here to the Minnesota moment.
Minnesota moment.
Yeah, so I'm going to go Game 2 top 3, actually. It's a defensive play. Vasquez picking off Victor Scott at third with 1 out just absolutely changed the momentum of that game. And I realize it's early, but you look at it, the bottom of the third is when the Twins started putting the runs on the board. And it was a great play by Vasquez. He was paying a lot of attention. Scott got bunted over to third, and so obviously the Cardinals are playing to score 1 run. So to take that 1 run off the board, I think it was a big momentum switch, and it's what really gave the Twins sort of that boost to start hitting the ball in the bottom of the third.
Just another great play by Christian Vasquez. Behind the plate, in front of the plate, wherever he is. He's been really, really good.
He's my guy. I've never lost faith. I never lost faith.
My moment is actually something that didn't happen during the games, but it's these injury updates we're getting on Friday and Saturday. So we learned that Correa did actually have a setback in his recovery a couple weeks ago, but that he's something like running at 80% speed right now. We'll see. Hopefully this time at home means we're going to get some more updates here over the next week. We also hear that Buxton is really not going to be 100% the rest of the season. Basically, he's going to have to kind of reach a point where he's going to play with some pain, and I'm very curious to see how that goes. But I think that these updates that are not like, oh, great, which, by the way, we're probably going to end up seeing Correa out longer than Royce Lewis was out at the beginning of the year, or darn close. I mean, it's going to be almost 2 months, I think, by the time Correa really comes back. But I just wonder, at what point does Rocco look at the standings and say, we need Carlos Correa back now? There's still 3-4 games up on the Red Sox in the wild card. but I'm worried that these two not playing is going to cost them, even in the way, who knows, maybe this game, in fact, I guarantee actually the game 3 plays out differently if you've got Correa somehow playing in that game.
I want to build a championship culture.
Something's just different if they're playing.
Certainly. I think the defensive alignment obviously is the number one priority here at this point, where Rocco wouldn't have had to think so hard about getting himself set up for better defense in the ninth.
All right, well, that's kind of a question anyways.
I just don't know how it can get any better.
Mauer's Musings.
Since we're kind of talking about injuries here, so Alex Kirilloff was back at AAA. He played, I think it was on Friday, but then the Twins pulled him from his rehab stint here with soreness in that back injury that he's been dealing with. This is too bad. I want this guy to play well, but my question is this the last we've seen of Alex Kirilloff in a Twins lineup?
It's hard to imagine a situation where he's going to be on the roster to begin the season next year, knowing what he's up against and knowing the guys who have been successful in the corner outfield spots. Now, there is a little bit of hope because Max Kepler is unlikely to re-sign with the team, and so I think that's probably the most likely outcome, is that he takes the roster spot of Max Kepler. However, Max Kepler is an everyday player. And Alex Kirilloff at this point, when he's at his best, I agree, he is an everyday player, certainly, and a very good everyday player. But my goodness, Dan, when you can't stay on the field, there's only so much you can do as a team before you start looking at other options who can stay together.
So then that actually begets a follow-up. Do you think we're more likely to see Wallner or Larnach take over that right field every day, trust a lefty even against a lefty spot in the lineup that Kepler has?
I think that Wallner is better suited to play left field as opposed to right field because he's not as quick as you kind of need to be in right field at target field. So I think it's likely to be Larnach then in right, but I think either of those guys are a step down. As much as we mock the whole Max Kepler is the greatest right fielder in the history of baseball, he is a very good right fielder, so I don't know that either of those guys are going to be able to live up to what Max did in right field, but I think their offensive production, if you can hit better than Max Kepler, I mean, even from a power perspective, both of those guys I think have more upside. It's just one of those things where we're probably going to take a little bit of a hit on the defense, but I'll take it if they're going to score 2 or 3 runs, every series.
I mean, can't Tommy Watkins go out there and stand in short right and hit some baseballs off the limestone just for some training? I mean, surely this is something they can get better at.
Can I tell you that one of my nightmares is that I meet Tommy Watkins in real life and somehow he's heard the podcast and he just knows that I have just brutally mocked him on the show. It just concerns me because I'd be like, hey, Tommy, nice to meet you. I love the Twins. Thanks for what you do. But I'd have to kind of, tongue in cheek. I'm not exactly sure what I'd say. It's just, I'm very scared of that happening in my life someday, Dan.
He might just be the nicest guy too. And then you're going to,
I'm sure he is. I'm sure that's what makes it worse. Because anytime I'm making fun of anybody in the MLB, unless you're one of the 6 guys who everybody knows is kind of a jerk,
Josh Donaldson.
I'm sure you're perfect.
Is on that
exactly.
list for sure.
Yeah, Bryce Harper. I'm sure you're Tommy Pham, I think, to some extent.
Jock Peterson, I think, is involved with that too. Yeah.
Correct. I think Jock Peterson, the way that he gave these interviews about Tommy Pham slapping him or whatnot, he doesn't seem like
dude,
a very
bro.
cool
He's a dude,
either.
bro.
100%. He's wearing camo shorts to those softball games that he goes to in the fall after his team is out of the postseason.
Anyway.
We have ventured away here, Dan. I don't know that we'll ever see him in a Twins jersey. I do think that the chances right now are probably 40-60 no.
All right, well, let's go on to your question here.
So do you have any fear now, Dan? I'm looking at the wild card standing. So the Twins are currently 3 games back in the Central, tied with the Royals. But looking at the wild card standing, the Red Sox are only 4.5 back from the Twins. The Mariners are 7 back. The Rays are 7 games back. And Dan, the Tigers, last episode, you laughed at me because I said if the Twins were 9 back, I'm just saying if the Twins were 9 back at this point in the season, I would still be holding out hope that they can make the wild card. The Tigers are now only 7.5 back, Dan. They've gained a game and a half.
Don't give me hope.
All right. No, the Tigers are not. If the Tigers make the playoffs, David, I will buy your ticket to the next board game convention of your choice. That's what I'll do, David.
Wow.
If the Tigers make the playoffs.
Germany, here we come. Looking forward to that.
Essen 25. That's where we'll be.
I'm very excited about that, Dan. But no, truly, do you have any fear regarding the Twins? Because of the injury news and because the Guardians and the Royals are looking competent, are you getting a little bit more fearful that this team is less of a lock for the postseason?
Yeah, I feel 60-40. Yes, no. right now on this baseball team, because I think that an implosion is not that far out of the question, right? If these starting pitchers, what if somebody gets hurt? What if something happens to David Festa even? I don't know. I mean, Louis Varland maybe comes up. I just think they have enough questions at starting pitching. The bullpen. Thank goodness they got rid of Ockert, right? They brought back a guy named Scott Blewett, for goodness sake, if there's ever a bad name for a bullpen guy. So yeah, and I think the issues with Correa and Buxton, maybe they say, I don't know, I have a hard time saying that we won't see Correa and Buxton, but what if they come back and they're not effective? So yeah, there's enough variables there to just cast some shadows of doubt over their playoff hopes, and it's going to make this run a little bit more interesting. Let's say that.
I can tell that my confidence is waning a bit because of my hostility after a loss is significantly more than it was like a month ago.
Yeah.
Where it's like, oh yeah, that's too bad, but maybe they can still take the series. And now it's like they lose one and I'm like, oh my goodness, what are they doing? Rocco's a moron. Why didn't he do this? Why didn't he do that? Why can't this guy play well?
Well, what a perfect segue into the series grades.
Series grades.
It is, Dan. D-. Game 1 seemed like nobody cared. Terrible at bats. The misplays in Game 3. I didn't like in Game 1 that Festa didn't seem like he came out with his best stuff and the team didn't really seem to care to pick him up. I just really did not care for the way this series went, especially an interleague series against a team that it's a 500 baseball team, Dan. But my goodness, these are the kind of teams that you need to put away if you're going to make the postseason.
Yeah, they've put a little bit more pressure now on the rest of this homestand here. I gave them a 4 out of 10 in the advanced retreat because of that. I thought this was a place where they could have taken this big step forward, and they did not. Well-played baseball. I get the lack of energy, certainly in Game 1. I thought overall, aside from Eddie Julien, so if there are 10 guys in the field, well, there's 9 guys in the field at any one time, so we'll round up here, but 8 out of 9 were playing well, I think, overall in this series. It's just, I'm looking at Eddie Julien saying, you didn't play well, so I'm going to say 9 out of 10 there. It's a 13 out of 20, which is a C-.
So looking at the question I asked a few episodes ago, this is sort of crazy, Dan, how accurate you've been with your picks. So you said that they'd win 3 against the Rangers, which they did. You said they'd win 1 against the Padres, which they did. You said they'd win 1 against the Cardinals, which they did. And that was one that I was like, nah, I think they're going to take at least 2 here. And now, Dan, the Braves, you have them winning 1 against the Braves. I'm hoping you're wrong here. I guess I hope you're wrong only if they win 2. I don't hope you're wrong if they win none. Like that. I am hoping to go to 1 or 2 of these. I'm excited. Hopefully it's not so hot, Dan. My goodness, it's like 1,000 degrees out nowadays.
Yeah, that's what I heard. I hope I am wrong too, but I don't know. Braves are pretty good.
All right, well, let's take a look around the league here. Herbie's headlines.
I don't know, Jack. It looked like Herbeck pulled him off the bag.
Herbie's headlines.
Well, your boy Shohei, Dan.
Hold on. This is Holmes' boy
himself.
Shohei. I am on the Bobby Witt Jr., he's my boy kind of deal. But no, not Shohei.
Gotcha. I thought, Bobby Witt? Oh, my goodness, Dan. Are you in some sort of a love triangle here?
All rise for Dan's Judge Love.
I'm conflicted.
What is this Bobby Witt? Does Aaron know, Dan?
He doesn't have a cool pun like Aaron Judge does. We'll have to find something else. The Vizzini one kind of works, right?
I can't compete with you physically, and you're no match for my brain.
Because of the wit? Like the Bobby Witt?
Oh, man. Right. Only you, Dan. Only
Sorry,
you.
It's not perfect.
Goodness.
Anyway.
It's like a pun. It's a play on words.
No, but anyway, Shohei Ohtani is the fastest player ever to get to the 40-40 club. 40 home runs, 40 stolen bases in a season. This man, even if he doesn't pitch, I feel like he seems to be worth the contract that the Dodgers gave him.
I was actually talking to a Dodgers fan at the fair, and he said he was kind of upset Dodgers signed Shohei, and not because he didn't want Shohei on the team, but because he would have liked to see Shohei bring the spotlight to another team who's maybe a little bit less of these high rollers, which is a mad respect. Respect for a Dodgers fan who wished that Shohei went to a lesser team in order to bring the spotlight to that town. But I think, like, heart of hearts, that guy's thinking like, oh, thank goodness we got Shohei.
Well, yeah, exactly. I'd like to have Shohei too. He could have come to Minnesota, shine a bright spotlight on Target Field.
Funny note here on this 40-40 ball. So it bounced back into the field of play, and the center fielder, clearly not realizing what this was, just tossed it back into the fans, which I just thought was so funny.
He could have kept it and gotten like a signed bat or something from Shohei himself. That would have been perfect.
You're a center fielder. And hey, Mr. Ohtani. Also, I think we should play that, like, you got to know when to hold them. You got to know when to fold them whenever we talk about Ohtani.
That works on so many levels. So the other thing we want to note is that the Guardians and the Royals start a 4-game series here this week. So a big chance for the Twins here. If they could somehow sweep the Braves, they're going to gain on somebody here pretty significantly. Maybe even both of them if they split.
Is that what you want at this point? Like, I always have a hard time knowing exactly what I want because it's not perfect, right? Because there's still a lot of games left in the season. I think a split is what we want here, yeah?
But the other thing is if one of them sweeps the other, then that kind of opens the wild card spot up, a little bit more for the Twins too. So there's either way, it's good that they're playing each other, I suppose.
Certainly, yes. Okay, well, with that here, let's make our picks here for the upcoming Braves series.
And we'll see you tomorrow night.
Puckett's Picks.
Well, the listeners are going to take Lewis. I get second pick. I'm going to go with Larnach, who hasn't been picked all that often, Dan. So I'm kind of excited to see where that goes. And then Hogs is going to take Matt Wallner. He's picking third, which is hilarious. And then Dan, you're going to pick last. Who are you going to take?
I know. All my guys are gone here.
Vasquez.
No, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to put my money where my mouth is, and I'm going to pick Brooks Lee. He's coming off the injured list. He's going to have a big series. He's going to play better than Eddie. I'm going to take Brooks Lee.
Okay, now keep in mind, we've set rules now, Dan.
I know.
If Lee doesn't come back, you don't get his Saint stats. That's not how this works.
It's okay. I'll take him either way.
All right. Well, with that, Dan, would you please send us out?
Folks, if you like what you hear, please tell a friend. You can follow us on X at Min for the Win and find our Min for the Win Facebook and Instagram pages. Make sure you're subscribed to the podcast on your favorite platforms so you're notified when new episodes are available. And if you could leave us a rating or a like, we'd greatly appreciate it. If you'd like to support the show further, you can find us on Patreon. The link is in the description. Thanks for listening, and as always, go Twins.
That'll wrap up another episode of Men for the Win, a podcast hosted by David Kufis and Dan Thompson, two avid fans who appreciate well-played baseball, especially when it's done by the Twins. Thanks so much for listening, and as always, go Twins.